right. I know that there have been some inquiries today regarding some discipline that has taken place in the department, both last Friday and then again yesterday. I know we've received some questions regarding these 3 specific cases. I anticipate one of these cases will likely go to an appeal, and I will answer as many questions as I can on that case. I do not have a prepared statement today because I'm really here to answer questions that have been brought forward from the media. So this is really your opportunity to ask any specific questions about these 3 cases. We do have the suspension memos that are out there on all 3 cases. I believe that you all have those, and they contain a lot of the information. However, if you have specific questions, then that's what this time is for today.
The officer that was suspended for the breathalyzer certification test that he had to undergo, how often is that certification test?
So if you're an toxalyzer operator, you have to be licensed and trained to do that. And then part of your being licensed, you have to run a certain number of tests in a certain period. And I'm not one, so I don't know the exact parameters of that. What is allowed for and what happens is if you are coming up towards your time for recertification and you have not conducted enough toxalyzer tests on individuals, then you do what's called the self-test. You can actually go and you turn on the machine, the toxalyzer machine, you run it through all of its checks, and then you blow into the machine and you run a test as if you were the subject, and then that counts as a test towards your certification. Officer Cuellar is a day shift officer, and so the use of IOs on day shift is not as frequent as it is on our evenings and night shifts. And so that's why when he came to work that morning, he told his sergeant that he needed to go and conduct a self-test because he knew he had to get a couple done prior to his certification coming up. So he chose to go over there on his own and administer that test.
Would he be facing any criminal charges for driving beforehand or afterward?
He is not going to face any criminal charges on this one. However, we did, in review of this incident, look at the time at which he drove, and we know that he was driving that morning at 5:30. That's when he showed up to work. We've got documentation of him arriving at work, and we were able to do extrapolation based on his known blood alcohol content when he took both of those tests, and then the scientists can extrapolate that backwards. And so that's why, and this is all in the suspension memo, that his blood alcohol level was estimated between a .084 and a .12 when he pulled into work that morning. And that's why administratively we sustained a violation of the department's policy for a DWI.
Now, first of all, what is Officer Cuellar's full name?
It's in the memo.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not get those.
It's Officer Michael Cuellar.
Well, how long has he been with the APD, and has he had any previous issues?
No, Officer Cuellar has not had any significant issues in the past that I am aware of.
Now, where does the investigation go from here?
So as far as the investigation, the internal affairs investigations are closed. You are aware that the officers, the level of suspension that they each received. I do expect that Officer Cuellar will exercise his right to appeal his indefinite suspension.
Now, the other officer, he got a 60-day suspension. Was there any, in regards to reporting it to other people and anything like that, were they delayed in that time, or why was he also suspended?
So in this instance, we have policies that specifically direct our supervisors what to do if they believe an employee has shown up to work under the influence of alcohol or drugs. We have a specific policy that addresses that, and in this case our sergeant did not follow that policy, and that's why he ended up with an agreed upon suspension of 60 days in this instance. We have a zero tolerance policy in the Austin Police Department for DWI, and we have a zero tolerance for showing up at work under the influence of alcohol or drugs. We are a zero tolerance in the workplace. We have several programs in this department to help our officers, and I encourage any officer that will see this press conference or see this on the news that it is important that you come forward if you need help. If you know of a fellow officer that needs help, it is important to let him or her know of all of the resources and get them help. You know, we recruit from the same population as the community that we serve, and our officers suffer sometimes from the same challenges that members of our community do. But we have to come forward when we have a problem. We have to seek the help that's available. We have peer support program. We have an EAP program. We've got a lot of resources available for our officers. The challenge is if we only try to address this on the back end after something has happened, as did happen with Officer Cuellar, then at that point our hands are tied with the discipline system, because there were a couple of violations committed that the discipline called for is an indefinite suspension. We take a very strong stance on DWI in this community. We do a lot of work in the no refusal arena, because we've all seen too often the damage and the death caused by driving while intoxicated. And so that's why we hold our community to a high standard, and that's why we will hold our officers to that same high standard if we believe a violation has occurred. And again, that's why in this instance, Officer Cuellar received the indefinite suspension.
So will you guys go back and possibly charge him with other things, possibly DWI?
No, this case has been reviewed, and although there will not be any criminal charges, he is facing the internal sanction of the DWI, which was the indefinite suspension.
And just really quick, I know he didn't receive the memos, and can you just give us like the most recent information about the other two cases? One is the road rage.
Sure.
The breathalyzer, and the third one?
Is the supervisor of the officer who came to work that day. The road rage incident that you referred to occurred on October 31st of last year. We had one of our officers who was off duty who became involved in an incident where he was on the road and got involved with another driver in some type of a road rage. He followed that driver to his home. This occurred in Round Rock, with the intent to get information, the license plate, try and get a picture of the driver so that he could move forward with trying to file a complaint with the Round Rock Police Department. After doing that, when he turned around to drive back out of the neighborhood, that other driver had come out of his residence with a shotgun. And instead of just leaving the situation and moving on, our officers stopped and continued that interaction. That driver ended up following our officer back to his residence. And again, when our officer came out front on that instance, instead of just calling 911 for the local police to respond, he got involved again. And we have policy in this department that dictate when an officer should get involved in circumstances when they are off duty. And that really is only when someone's safety or the safety of another, safety of that officer is in danger. Other than that, we want them to be the best witness. We want them to call 911, to report it, to get the local officers that are on duty there as quickly as possible. And in this instance, we did not believe that that was what occurred, but instead that our officer got involved in a situation that he did not need to. And then once he identified himself as an officer, he did not represent himself in line with the department's expectations through the conduct, the conversation, and the language with the individual that he had stopped.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.